Black Widow is finally being released after having been delayed 3 times over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. We all know how the story of Natasha Romanoff ends in the MCU, at least within its first 3 phases. Who knows if she'll ever be brought back in the future, but it's going to be interesting watching her standalone adventure regardless, one set earlier in the franchise, and a movie that should have been released years ago. To mark the occasion, I will be ranking the 10 greatest villains of Black Widow. Maybe some of these characters will see the light of day in future MCU installments. Who knows? Of course, these choices are my own opinions, so if I miss any characters you would have included, just leave them in the comment section below. But realize we all have different tastes and preferences when it comes to villains. Starting off my list at number 10, I've chosen Melina Vostokov, the Iron Maiden. She was a former agent and spy for the Russian government who lived in the shadow of Natasha Romanoff and would grow to despise her. She now works as a freelance mercenary and assassin and was part of the group of assassins sent by Damon Dran, more on him later, to kill Black Widow. The Iron Maiden is skilled at various martial arts, stealth, espionage, and wears a special suit of armor that gives her superhuman strength and protects her from physical damage, as well as energy attacks, such as Black Widow's signature Widow's Bite. She would seemingly die after her first encounter with Natasha, defeated when Jimmy Woo shot a hole into the ground of the sewers, creating a whirlpool that Vostokov was then sucked into, though she would return as a member of the Femazons, a group of female supervillains who would battle Captain America, aiming to conquer the Earth and enslave men. Next up at number 9 is another mercenary and assassin named Snapdragon, real name Shioki Sanada. She is a highly skilled martial artist who utilizes a bow staff, bolas, and bladed weapons within her arsenal. She also made use of an infrared scanner to beat the shit out of Natasha in the dark. She didn't even see the attacks coming. Snapdragon was hired to kill Black Widow in Japan, and much like Iron Maiden, was a member of the Femazons. She also battled Moon Knight at one point as well, in Volume 4 of his series. At number 8 we have Jerome Beachman, Mandrill, a mutant born with darker skin, body hair, and sharp fangs, resembling a mandrill primate. His father had been an atomic research scientist and was exposed to high levels of radiation before he and his wife conceived their child. Mandrill has the ability to release pheromones from his body that makes all women attracted to him. He would end up using his power against the Black Widow during his attempt to overthrow the US government. Moving on to number 7 with Bullseye, commonly an enemy of Daredevil, but has faced off with the Black Widow on occasion. The most prominent example was when he had used her as bait to lure the Men Without Fear into a trap. Of course, Daredevil and Black Widow have a complicated romance, so targeting her made a lot of sense. Next up at number 6 is Damon Dran, who also goes by the alias The Indestructible Man. He was a paranoid businessman that developed a special weapon and armor called Project 4 that would help him survive World War III, which he felt was inevitable. He would take on both Black Widow and Daredevil during the early 1970s. In recent stories, he would kill several ambassadors of the defunct USSR through the terrorist Molot Boga, who called himself the Hammer of God. Boga would be defeated by Black Widow and was then given durable steel implants by Dran for a second encounter. Next up at number 5 we have Anya, known simply as the Head Mistress. She is the daughter of the Red Room Academy's custodian, also known as the Head Mistress, if looks could kill. Anya was not trained in the Red Room by her mother, however, and was the odd one out. She would try to impress and befriend Natasha, her mother's star pupil, but to no avail. Years later, Anya and her mother would form the Dark Room, a more extreme version of the Red Room that focused on training child assassins. Anya wants to prove that she is better than Natasha, the Black Widow. She's pissy over the fact that her mother seemed to care for Natasha more than her own daughter, and Anya has drunk the Kool-Aid, the teachings of her mother, believing she knows best for her students, exploiting them as pawns, and nothing more, though they do eventually turn on her. Moving on to number 4 with Rose, a character that only made a single appearance in Marvel Comics, facing off with the combined forces of Black Widow and Daredevil among the pages of Daredevil Black Widow Abattoir from 1993. Rose is a serial killer with mind control powers who uses her abilities to force her victims to kill themselves. She loves inflicting pain and views her targets as canvases, portraits of death in the making. Rose would capture Black Widow and force her to watch her victims die one by one within a secluded cabin in the middle of winter. She would also use her powers to allow Natasha to view her abusive upbringing, being molested by her father, who would end up killing her mother, before Rose forced him to take his own life by jumping off a building. Black Widow manages to kill Rose, stabbing her in the chest, but it leaves her incredibly emotional. Being at the mercy of Rose clearly got under her skin and left a lasting impression on her. At number 3, I have Yelena Belova, the second Black Widow following Natasha Romanoff. She would become resentful of her predecessor, feeling her skills were superior to Natasha's, and attempted to eliminate her so she could be the only Black Widow left standing. It's a common trope with hero-villain characters, having to face off against someone who is in many ways a mirror image of yourself, and Yelena Belova fits into that mold. I think a lot of people might rank this character higher on their lists, but she isn't always a straight-up villain, more of an anti-hero. She has been known to rescue Natasha on occasion, and both being byproducts of the Red Room, there is an unspoken bond and kinship between the two. Next up at number 2 is the Red Guardian, Alexei Shostakov, the ex-husband of Natasha Romanoff. Now, Red Guardian is technically a superhero, the Russian counterpart of Captain America, but he is far more ruthless and brutal with his form of heroism, and he has fought the Avengers multiple times in the past. The main reason he is on this list, though, is because of his tenure as the assassin Ronin, leading a fictionalized version of the ultra-nationalist group, the Dark Ocean Society. Alexei had the Society kill espionage agents all over the world, including those found within the Red Room. He also commanded a team called the Supreme Soviets, and had them attack Black Widow and Hawkeye, among others. His ultimate goal was to ignite a war between Russia and Japan, and restore Russia back to its former glory. And this brings us to number 1, my pick for the greatest villain of Black Widow, Ivan Petrovich. He was a Russian soldier who had saved Natasha from the house fire that killed the rest of her family. He would become a father figure to her, and had her trained in the Black Widow Ops program within the Red Room. He would act as Natasha's handler and chauffeur when she was an assassin, but would develop romantic feelings for her over the years, feelings that were not reciprocated. Ivan would grow jealous of many Western superheroes Natasha would spend time with, hating whenever she was looked at or touched the wrong way. He would eventually fake his own death and have himself transformed into a cyborg. He had a massive space station built called the Dreadnought that was designed to defeat the SHIELD helicarrier. He would also intend to drop countless nuclear warheads onto the Earth before he was defeated and killed by Black Widow. Ivan is such a great villain because he was someone close to Natasha, there from the very beginning, a side character that was retroactively given stronger motivations and purpose throughout the decades, acting as a father figure, being overprotective of Black Widow, and then wanting to be with her romantically, forcing himself onto her at one point. These are things that work with an antagonist, a very personal antagonist like Ivan, and of course, turning himself into a cyborg and wanting to essentially destroy the world. That level of insanity is something only a villain can pull off. Well, that's gonna do it for this list, guys. I want to thank you all for watching, and if there are any characters you feel I might have missed, just leave them in the comment section down below. I will see each and every one of you in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.